to increase your energy, heal your body, and transform your life. And we've been going through the challenge chapter by chapter, but within the 18 chapters, there's 12 steps. This is going to be a great way to summarize what we've been talking about so far. First step was also chapter 1, take responsibility. If we want the circumstances of our life to be different, we have to be the one to change them. Remember the 3 questions my uncle asked me? How badly do you want things to change? What are some of the things you know you could do? And how many hours a day do you spend doing those things? Of course, when you're limited in energy, you can't do everything you might want to do, but use the energy you've got in a constructive way to support your healing journey. Number 2 was also chapter 2, although after a while the chapters and the steps don't quite coincide. Chapter 2, get an accurate diagnosis. A diagnosis of ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia is not a diagnosis that tells you what's actually wrong. It's a label for a set of symptoms. You need to have standard medical testing to make sure there's not some other thing that explains it, which there may be. But if not, your diagnosis does not give you the clarity that you need of what's really going on. That's really where the map of this book of decoding becomes hopefully really valuable. Step 3, understand the role of your mitochondria, your cellular energy production. This is the mechanism behind your body creating energy. If we are deficient in energy, something's going on that's blocking or affecting our mitochondria. We can give raw ingredients to support our cellular energy production, but it's not as simple as that. And as we talked about throughout the rest of the journey, there are many factors that can affect our cellular energy production. Number 4, understand your personality. We talked about the 5 energy depleting psychologies: the achiever, the helper, the anxiety, the controller, and the perfectionist. These ways of relating to the world are draining. And it's not just a case of resolving those to support recovery or balancing those to support recovery. It's also preventing relapse. If we don't deal with those underlying patterns, we end up recreating the same situation. This is where this part of the map came in the early days at the Optimum Health Clinic, of looking, why were people that got more energy crashing? It was often because of these personality patterns. Number 5, create an environment for healing. What are the different loads, the psycho-emotional loads, the physical loads? What are the loads on your system which are depleting and draining you, that are potentially in the way of your body's capacity to heal? They might also be things that were causal factors in burning out in the first place. Number 6, get in a healing state. We've talked about this quite a lot in the challenge. For the body to heal, it has to be in a healing state. We need to look at what's causing the maladaptive stress response, a natural stress response that when it becomes maladaptive becomes a block to our capacity to heal. Number 7, optimize your digestion. We talked about the different stages of the digestive process, some of the different things that can go out of balance at the different stages. But we also talked about something super simple. Just chew every mouthful 20 times. Just starting your food on its journey through your digestive process more broken down will make that process easier. Number 8, balance your hormones. We talked about removing the stimulants. We talked about things that cause your system to get overactivated and then to crash on the other side. We talked about a number of different factors that can help it, one of them being circadian rhythms. making sure that we get some sunlight at the start of the day, but not too much light, for example, later in the day. Also, different people's bodies have different rhythms and different things that affect those rhythms. Learning to be in rhythm with the rhythms, learning to be in balance with those. Number 9, support your immune system. Investigating possible loads. We talked about viral loads like glandular fever, Epstein-Barr virus, COVID. We talked about toxic mold. We talked about Lyme and co-infections. The different loads that can be on your system, which can then firstly, remember what I said, it takes a lot of energy to fuel your immune system. So if your immune system's working really hard, it's taking a lot of energy to do that. But also, those loads on your system are causing symptoms. Number 10. And I went on a rant here. If you haven't watched that video, I recommend you do. Discover your baseline and learn to pace. I talked about the reason why traditional wisdom around pushing through is so flawed, both from a science perspective, but also from every perspective. We talked about the 4 different types of tiredness: mental, emotional, physical, and environmental, and different things that can help address and resolve those different types of tiredness. We then talked about in the next day the 3 stages of recovery. What's helpful at one stage can become harmful another stage. We need to understand what stage we're at and then sequence intervention based upon the stage of recovery that we're at. Number 11, we need to optimize food. We talked about this on Saturday. I talked about the 80-20 rule, following the program you're on as much as you can 80% of the time, 20% of the time having a slightly looser, perhaps, interpretation. I talked about some of the do's, making sure that you eat organic, eating enough protein, eating a rainbow. I also talked about some of the don'ts, avoiding sugar, dairy, gluten, highly processed foods. So really giving your body the very best chance, because you're putting in the best you can. And remember, you're not just what you eat, although what you eat is important. You're also what you absorb. And what we talked about in terms of your digestive system, I think that would have been on day 9, 9 or 10, is of course an important part of it. And then yesterday, we talked about managing your team. Who's on your team that's helping support the healing journey? Do you have the right people on your team? And are you maximizing? Are you getting the best out of the people that you have on your team? It's a simple checklist in the book, and I'm going to be more and more blatant today and tomorrow. In the book, it's very clearly laid out these different steps, the different pieces to prioritize with the different steps. But really, my challenge to you in today, and we'll come to your homework in a minute, is to create an action plan based upon what you've learned so far in the challenge. But before we come to that, I also want to make one other point. What we're going through, be it highly debilitating fatigue or just being a little bit more tired than we'd like to be, it's an incredibly difficult, it's a challenging experience, and I believe that there is a wisdom in life. My healing journey was one of the most difficult things, if not the most difficult thing I've ever done. And there were amazing insights, lessons. My entire life path and direction was ultimately born out of those difficult and challenging experiences. And so many times over the years, people have said the same to me. And it's when you're going through it, it's like the last thing that you want to hear, that positive, that there can be gifts in this experience. It's often when we're coming through the other side, we're able to look back and go, I would never choose this. I wouldn't wish this on my worst enemy. And I can make a choice to take positive lessons from this experience. And My wife's sister, my sister-in-law, about 8 or 9 years ago, started developing severe fatigue symptoms. It turned out, a long story cut short, and it's the final bit of the final chapter of the book telling Violet's story. Turned out she had chronic Lyme disease, and she lived with my wife and I for the 2.5 years that she was pretty much housebound at the worst possible part of her healing journey. And it was incredibly difficult for her, and it's also why I really feel like I've seen these illnesses from every perspective. I've been through it. I've been a practitioner. I've trained practitioners for, 16, 17 years. But I've also been the carer of someone going through this. And one of the things that Violet discovered, she used to do some art in her room as a way of just kind of getting through the day and just sort of almost distracting herself from her symptoms. But her art became her place to escape. And I didn't really know what was going on. And then one day on my birthday, this had been going on for a year, 18 months she'd been doing this. She presented me with the most unbelievable, beautiful, intricate drawing using charcoal of a beautiful old lady's face. And art became her passion. It became her place to express herself when she was trapped in the house at that period of time. Having now gone on to make a full recovery for the last few years, she's had a very successful career as an artist, exhibiting in different countries around the world. You can see the piece of artwork that I mentioned. In fact, there's a whole video with Violet, an interview with Violet, as part of the free companion course. So if you buy the book, you get access to a free companion course, and you'll see a 45-minute interview with Violet telling her story, including some of her artwork. But the point I want to make, if she hadn't been through that very difficult experience, she wouldn't have had the time and the space. She was so busy being a social worker and a helper and trying to help save everyone else. It was through being forced to be trapped at home, or at home when she was living with us, that she discovered this skill, this talent and this passion. Everyone's journey is different. And I'm not sat here telling you that you have to find the positive in what you're going through. And life is also about focus, and we can choose to look for everything that's wrong. We can choose to be a victim, even though we're suffering. We can choose to see that there's no path, or we can choose to say, this is awful, I don't want this, and have empathy and love for ourselves, but also recognize that we can focus on the growth and on the learnings and on the positives that we can find. And I think for many people, coming through the other side, there's an appreciation of life. There's a kind of preciousness of experience in life, which is greatly magnified when we've been through something that's challenging. So in addition to the 12 steps, really my final invitation before we come to your homework, and obviously we've got the Q&A tomorrow, and is really, what, if you were to choose to find the positives in your experience, what might they be? So that can be your homework, but your kind of main homework is, what are 3 takeaways from the challenge so far that you're going to work to put into practice? It could be something as simple as chewing each mouthful 20 times. It could be starting a meditation practice. It could be looking to find the right practitioners. I hope it will be buying the book. But whatever those 3 takeaways are, that's your homework to get started on those. And you might want to share in the comments. I think it's always helpful for people to hear different people's takeaways and might go, oh wow, that's a good one, I hadn't thought of that. So feel free to share in the comments. I'll take a few questions and then I'll let you know who the winner is from yesterday of a copy of the book. So there we go. Hillary says, I haven't got a team, there's only me. So Hillary, that's your first step, isn't it? It's to find that team, to build that team. And others say they feel very alone. Hopefully there's been a sense of community in this group, that you realize actually you're not alone. You're not the only one going through this experience. People asking, how do you find a coach? I will talk a bit tomorrow at some point around the Optimum Health Clinic. That's certainly a pathway. I'll also talk a bit about the Reset program. I know there's been some questions around that as well. Mia says, I love Violet's story. Bless you. She's so talented. Yes, she's genuinely amazing. Let me scroll down a bit more. A few people are asking about the companion course. So the companion course is very simple. There's two ways you can get access. The first way is if you go to decodeyourfatigue.com, and at the bottom of the page you can register your purchase just with your order number. But also when you buy the book, in the book is a secret link directly to the companion course. So if you're having trouble signing up that way, don't worry, because your book's going to arrive hopefully tomorrow. And in the book, you will then find the direct link to the companion course otherwise. Someone was asking, Laura's asking, have you seen full recovery in women 40 plus years old? Absolutely, Laura, absolutely. Pamela says, when you say get light in the morning, can that be sitting by a window, or do we actually have to be outside? It's better outside, Pamela, but it doesn't have to be outside. Just getting some light, and even internal light will help. Sunlight's better, but that will help still. Catherine says, I think my positive is realizing my own strength and ability to be happy through most of this horrendous experience. You know, Catherine, if you can be positive when going through an awful experience, being positive the rest of your life is not going to be so challenging, right? And it's not that I'm saying positive to deny the negative and deny the suffering. It's more about where you choose to put your focus. For example, we've talked about fatigue for 21 days straight, but we've talked about solutions and pathways forward, although I very much empathized with the misery and the difficulty, and we've talked about that. We've just not lived there as our focus. Let's find one or two more. Bridget says, my first step is to learn more about mitochondria. I'm getting really blatant now. The chapter in the book breaks it down a lot more than we talked about in the session, so I think that will be helpful. Justine says to eat less chocolate, to read more, especially your book. Thank you, and eat more organic. Thank you, Alex. You're very welcome, Justine. Let me jump for a few more. Hari's asking, where can we find the book? The name of the book is the same as the name of the challenge. It's called Decode Your Fatigue. It's on Amazon. It's on Book Depository. It's on all the usual places. It's in bookshops. So, yeah, it shouldn't be hard to find it. Shona says, and 60s. I think she means people making full recoveries. I've seen people make full recoveries at every single age. Men, women, children, people in their 70s, people in their 80s. Does that mean that everyone in every situation make a full recovery? Not necessarily. I don't think we know or anyone knows everything there is to be known about fatigue. But is it possible for everyone to make progress? Absolutely. And the majority of people to make dramatic progress is with the right interventions in the right way at the right time. Caroline says, if you could pick only one, which step is the most important? I'm going to be really annoying, Caroline. I'm going to bat it back to you. I can't pick the one step because it's different for different people. I think it's what resonates to you is often the place to focus. Emma asks, how important is sticking to a routine, including around waking up and doing work? If we have the luxury of not working, is that better, focusing on healing full time? It's a great question, Emma. For some people, very rigid routine is incredibly helpful, particularly at stage 1 into stage 2. In the late stage of stage 3, too much routine can actually be a block because it can be overly restrictive. Working, not working is an interesting one. What you certainly don't want is work to be causing a pressure and a stress in your system. But it's also true to say that sometimes if there's no focus, sometimes people stop work completely and they have got energy, that after a while they end up drifting without structure and focus. So I think it's individual. It depends upon how you respond. But don't assume having nothing to do is always better than having something to do. But of course, sometimes it is. I can see lots more questions coming in. I want to finish in a minute because I'm mindful of these sessions not being too long for people. But we're going to get much more into questions tomorrow. A few people are asking, what does full recovery mean? And I think full recovery is different for different people. It's certainly having abundant energy and being able to do the things that you want to do without worrying about crashing or doing too much. But many people had unsustainable, unhealthy ways of living before they got ill. Going back to that is not a measure of health. Going back to that is a measure of going the wrong way. But equally, one should be able to have the energy for life and enjoy feeling good ultimately in their body. So the winner of the book from yesterday is Erica Swainson. Erica, please email Lucy